to the virtual classroom. Welcome children. Today is the first day of the session 2021. Take out your English literature book, Longman Impression, Revised Edition, Part 7. Now let's start the story. When I was a very small boy, that means here I represent the narrator. When the narrator was a very small boy, I was made to learn by heart certain of the fables. Means the narrator, he was made to learn some fables written by La Fontaine, and the moral of each was carefully explained to him. And the moral of each fables was carefully explained to the narrator. Among those learned that the ant and the grasshopper, and among those fables he had learnt about the ant and the grasshopper, which is devised to bring home. Now it is devised to bring home to the young and the useful lesson. It gives a very useful lesson that in an imperfect world, in this imperfect world, hard work is rewarded. That means the person who works hard always gets reward, and giddiness punished, and the person who is lazy always punished. In this admirable fable, now in this admirable fable, that means in this praiseworthy fable, the ant spends a laborious summer, and ant has spent a laborious summer. That means ant is to work too hard, gathering its winter store. It is to gather food for the winter, while the grasshopper sits on a blade of it used to sit on a blade of grass, singing to the sun, and used to sing to the sun. Winter comes and the ant is comfortable, provided for. Now, with the approaching of the winter, the ant is too comfortable because it has food for himself, because it had already gathered food. But the grasshopper has an empty larder. But the grasshopper, its store is empty. He goes to the ant and begs for a little food. He goes to the ant and starts begging him to give him some food. Then the ant gives him a classic answer. Now the ant gives him a classic answer. What were you doing in the summertime? He asked that. What was he doing during the summertime? Saving your presents, I sang all day, all night. He said that saving the presents, I have sung all day and night. You sang? Well then, go and dance. If you have sung all day and night, now you go and dance. I do not ascribe it to perversity on my part, but rather to the inconsequence of childhood. Now, the narrator, he doesn't ascribe it to behave in an unreasonable manner on his part, but rather in consequence of his childhood, but rather without knowing the result of the child, which is deficient in moral sense. It is too deficient in moral sense that I could never quite reconcile myself to the lesson. Now, he couldn't reconcile himself to that lesson. My sympathies were with the grasshopper, but the narrator's sympathy remained with the grasshopper. And for some time, I saw an ant without putting my foot on it. Now, for some time, what he saw? He saw that the ant had not put his foot. In this summer, I sought to express my disapproval of prudence and common sense. Now, in that summer, he didn't express his disapproval and common sense. I could not help thinking of this fable when the others say I saw George Ramsay lunching by himself in a restaurant. Now, he couldn't help him thinking of this fable when other day, what he saw George Ramsay. What he was doing? He was taking lunch in a restaurant. I never saw anyone wear an expression of such deep gloom. He had never seen such a person having so gloomy face. He was staring into space. What he was looking? He was looking at the space. He looked through the burden of the whole world sat on his shoulder. He looked as if the burden of the whole world was on him. I was sorry for him. The narrator felt very sorry for him. I suspected at once that his unfortunate brother had been causing trouble again. Now, at once he suspected that his brother was making this trouble. I went up to him and held out my hand. The narrator went up to him to help him. How are you? I asked. Narrator asked him that how he was. I am not in a hilarious spirit, he answered. He said that he was not in a hilarious spirit. Is it Tom again? He sighed. Yes, it's Tom again. He sighed and said that yes, it was Tom again. Why don't you chuck him? You have done everything in the world for him. You must know by now he's quite hopeless. Now, why can't you tell him? The narrator said to Ramses that why can't you tell him? After all, you have done so much for him and you know he's quite hopeless. I suppose every family has a black sheep. Now, he said that I suppose means he supposed that every family has a black sheep. Here, black sheep refers to a person who always create disturbance or make difficulties in life. Tom had been a sore trial for 20 years. Since 20 years, Tom had always made some difficulty in his way. He had begun his life decent enough. He went into the business, married and had children. He had started his life in a very good way. First he got married, first he did business, he got married and had 2 children. The Ramsays were perfectly respectable people and there was every reason to suppose that Tom Ramsay would have a useful and honorable career. Now Ramsays, this family was perfectly a respectable family. People used to respect this family and every reason there was that every people used to say that Tom Ramsay, he would also become a useful and honorable career. But one day without warning, he announced that he didn't like work. But one day what happened? Without giving any previous warning, he announced that he didn't like to work. And he wasn't suited for marriage. And he was not at all suited for marriage. He wanted to enjoy himself. He just wanted to enjoy himself. He would not listen to no expostulations. Now, he would not listen to any arguing. He left his wife and his office. That means, what did he? He left his family and his business. He had a little money and spent 2 happy years in various capitals of Europe. Now, he had very little money and this money he had enjoyed. For 2 years, he enjoyed with this money and invested in various capitals of Europe, various parts of Europe. Rumors of his doings, his office relation from time to time, and they were profoundly. Now, what happened? Rumors, what he used to do, these rumors spread to all the relatives from time to time and they were too much surprised. There was too much surprise. He certainly had a very good time. Certainly had a very good time. They shook their head and asked what would happen when his money was. They used to means the relatives used to shook their head and they used to say that what would happen when Ramsay's money, Tom's money will all be spent. They soon found out he borrowed. Now they soon found out that after his money, what he did, Tom Ramsay, he borrowed money. He was charming and unscrupulous. He had a very charming personality and became very dishonest man. I have never met anyone to whom it was more difficult to refuse a loan. Now, the narrator had never met any person to whom it was more difficult to refuse for a loan. He made a steady income from his friend and made many friends. Now, for what he did, he made steady income from his friend and easily he could make friends. But he always said that money you spent on necessities but always what he used to say, that money which one spent for necessities, for buying the necessary thing, was just a boring. The money that was amusing to spend was the money you spent on it. But the money which one spent on luxuries is just amusing. And with this, I am ending my today's class. Goodbye.